And Amy, well, targeting members of Congress for assassination. It's been done before in this country. Wall Street Journal had a good little compendium on other similar attacks where members of Congress were the target. 1954, Puerto Rican nationalists opened fire in the congressional chamber, injuring 5 members of Congress. Of course, Gabby Giffords in
Yeah.
2011. In 98, you remember Tom DeLay. Uh, he had a gunman enter his office and murder 2 Capitol Hill police
Oh, that's
officers. Remember that?
mm-hmm.
Leo Ryan, Democrat from California, shot dead during his 1978 trip to Guyana to investigate Jim Jones and his cult before 900 people committed suicide. So it has happened before, but throughout the course of our country's history, it's thankfully somewhat rare. And the question is our culture today such that everybody is open season? We have a new level of toxicity in politics and the like. This is at least part of the debate that's being had. And also the question of law enforcement. Is law enforcement getting better at their job in trying to prevent these sorts of attacks before they happen? For more on that topic, we're pleased to be joined by John Ligato, who is a former undercover FBI special agent and U.S. Marine. John, thanks so much for joining us. Appreciate it.
Yeah, thanks for having me. And that was a great first question you asked the audience.
Well, yeah, I want to explore that with you, obviously because of your professional expertise and because of what we know about the shooter from Belleville, Illinois, his previous run-ins with the law. Now, this is maybe not a law enforcement problem on the police side. Maybe it's on the state's attorney side, but it's a question. This 2006 incident where he was arrested for domestic battery and the case was subsequently dismissed, the police report, pretty jarring, talking about him hitting his daughter and then punching a next-door neighbor who intervened and then firing a warning shot at that woman's boyfriend when he came out the door, and yet no prosecution that could have resulted in the removal of his FOID card and possibly, nothing is fail-safe, but possibly put him on the radar and made it more difficult for him to obtain guns, certainly legally.
Where do I begin? We have thousands of people on the radar. I mean, the problem, every time there's an attack, whether it's in Manchester or, Alexandria, the first question is, we knew that person was bad, or
Right.
was angry, or was violent. We can't do anything. Law enforcement can't do anything. If we try to do anything, we're going to have, ACLU screaming. We are in a position. Let me give you an example. I think in London, an MI5 had 23,000 people on a terrorist sort of watch list, 3,000 of which were rated priority. What do? Unless we begin to hurt some feelings and do things like profile and make the watch list a stop list, this is going to continue. You have to let law enforcement do their job.
But just on this matter, I mean, as I said, this incorporates the prosecution too, the local state's attorney in St. Clair County in this case. You prosecute cases where there's a lot of evidence, and the police report seems to indicate that somebody committed a violent act, so that they're more on the radar than they would otherwise be by dismissing the case. I mean, why? That maybe going back and looking at the decision-making that was made by the combination of police and prosecutor to not prosecute him in that case is something that at least would perhaps provide lessons learned.
Well, you're right. I mean, he never should have been allowed to get anywhere near a weapon. But then again, you have the court systems, which are very liberal in some districts. That's when you look at the map of the United States. If you commit a rape in Omaha, you might go to jail for 30 years. If you commit it in New York City, you might get probation. So that's one problem. We have some very liberal courts, but law enforcement hands are tied. I mean, if we try to get, I don't want to say aggressive, but then we get hit down with lawsuits. Cops get fired. I mean, you can't be proactive. In my generation, if I'm watching you throw a brick at me, Like I watched those cops in Baltimore who were told to stand down.
Mm-hmm.
You throw a brick at me, I'm arresting you for assault on a federal officer. They don't get arrested. So what is the message we're giving our youth? It's okay if illegal aliens burn a flag in front of you. It's okay if Black Lives Matter screen, pigs in a blanket, whatever. There's no consequences anymore. So what do we expect?
Well, one thing that is being praised, the actions of those two Capitol Police officers, Crystal Griner and with the other gentleman, David Bailey. Do any of your sources telling you exactly how they fought back and they took down the shooter?
Yeah, I was a Marine at Dway City in '68, and I got hit 3 times. I've been in about 50 firefights. You never know what your reaction is going to be until you get your first firefight. I am so impressed with these two Capitol Police officers for, running, towards. They didn't retreat. They were calm. The female officer was returning fire while wounded. That is fair. I can't tell you how, being in so many firefights, the courage and valor they showed. But that brings up another issue. If they weren't there, if they didn't have weapons, it would have been, you would have had, 20, 30, 40 congressmen confined in a brick dugout. They had nowhere to go. So I'm glad they were there.
Yeah, I mean, obviously the investigators descended on the shooter's home in Belleville. Walk us through what the FBI would do in a case like this in combination with Secret Service and other law enforcement agencies. How does the investigation proceed from here?
Well, it's interesting. It proceeds the same way as you would a lone wolf terrorist, a jihad. You would go into that person's background. You would get their phone. You would get their Rolodex. You would check their house in every note. You would social media. You would interview everybody that they've been contacted with in social media, chat rooms. You're going to do a complete background. You're going to go back into their history. You're going to, for the mental health part of this, what triggered this guy to do this, and then you're going to talk to them, the people that are in these chat rooms, these violent chat rooms. You're going to talk to his friends, his family, his coworkers, and you're going to do 2 things. You're going to try to find out if there's anybody else out there that helped him, encouraged him, gave him ammunition. I mean, we don't know all that. ATF will do a trace of the weapons. You're going to know everything about this guy in about 2 weeks.
Well, he seemed to have had a valid FOID card because when sheriff's deputies were called to his home in March after he was firing off 50 shots, they said he was very cordial. He showed them his FOID card and said, yeah, you know what, maybe I should be doing this at a gun range.
Well, again, see, I've been in situations where I just wanted to grab the person and cuff them. And you just can't do that. These police officers are worried about their pensions. They're worried about being sued. I mean, this is really outlandish what I'm going to say, but under different circumstances, these 2 Capitol Police officers, had it not been so, horrific yesterday, had it been, a shooting that wasn't involving congressmen, I guarantee you there would have been a pushback about this poor guy that they shot and killed, that he was mentally ill or he had given up and he had his hands up. I mean, that's the environment law enforcement finds themselves in. It's not conducive. And who put law enforcement in this? Leaders. Our leaders did that. They had 8 years of Holder and Obama. Every time there was a police shooting, immediately blame law enforcement. So you have 8 years of that to get over.
Well, and to your point, you want to talk about rather disturbing ironies. Yesterday in Chicago, Black Lives Matter filed a class action lawsuit against the Chicago Police Department.
Of course. And they get a trip to the White House. I mean, this is what our youth sees. This might sound out there, but ISIS youth is sort of indoctrinated from birth. And we're doing the same thing with our kids. I mean, they're taught there's no consequences for their actions. They go off to college and they're taught that they're victims of white power. I mean, they watch stuff and there's no consequences. So they feel they can do anything.
What do you think, the significance is that yet this attack happened on Republicans on President Trump's birthday? Do you think that played into this?
Hey, I don't know if the guy was smart enough to know it was Trump's birthday, but I do think that obviously, being an FBI investigator, you have some major clues here. You have the shooter going up to a Republican congressman and saying, are those guys Republicans or Democrats? That's a big clue. It is toxic. I mean, the whole thing is toxic, and you have these guys being whipped up into a frenzy on chat rooms, and you don't have anybody, saying, and we will do this now for the next 3 days. Let's all sing Kumbaya, and then we'll forget about it, and we're going to go on. We're going to go on. When I saw those congressmen and women on the House floor after I think the health care thing, chanting, la, la, la,
na, 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 hey, 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 goodbye, yeah.
Yeah, I'm looking at them, I'm thinking, people in Omaha, Nebraska are looking, these are our leaders. My God, we have a disagreement on ideology or policy, and you're taking it to the level. No wonder their rating is so low.
And those people are the same ones lecturing us on civility in politics today. Isn't it interesting? Just to the point that you were getting to about the shooter and this investigation and how it unfolds. I wonder what you would say about kind of outside influences, and we're kind of having this cultural discussion, but and not necessarily from a law enforcement perspective, but thinking about potential targets now. There's been a number of congressmen and women who've had their lives threatened, and there have been arrests made prior to this, Martha McSally in Arizona and others. And you've got a congressional recess coming up in the fall. These town halls have been very raucous. There's now discussion on the Hill about more security for more rank-and-file members of Congress. If you're advising as a security expert, what would you tell the respective caucuses to do when they go home with respect to security, with respect to town halls, and all of it?
That's a good question. They're pretty protected in Washington, at least in Congress. What they should do, each one of these congressmen have a home district. Each home district has sheriff's departments, police departments, FBI, RAs, or whatever. They need to, when they get out of that protected environment, coordinate with their local law enforcement and get some protection. Be met at the airport when they land in their home district, and this is what law enforcement does in a local area anyway. They provide that type of protection for potential targets. They need to get guns. They need to get their concealed carry. I don't think if you had a concealed carry, this is bizarre. I'm a retired agent, and I have somewhat an ability to carry a weapon, but I can't carry it on a plane anymore.
Mm-hmm.
Think about this. I was a Marine, an agent, a retired agent, firearms trading. I used to be able to get on a plane, walk around the magnetometers, get on the plane, and if something happened, I was trained on what to do. I can't do that anymore simply because I'm retired. So these congressmen, they could get their concealed carry permits, but they could probably be arrested for carrying it in, Congress where there's, no carry zone.
Yeah, or in places like Chicago when you're so close to a school or a church or a liquor store or, all of the regulations underneath the licensing.
Right.
That's a fair point. He is John Ligato, former undercover FBI special agent and U.S. Marine. John, thanks so much for joining us, sharing your insights. Appreciate it.
Yeah, listen, one last thing. I have a
Sure.
book out called The Near Enemy.
Okay.
And it goes into all of this. It's on Amazon, The Near Enemy. It goes into things that we could do to have prevented yesterday's attack, believe it or not. And it's fictional, but I use real-life events. Like if I was writing it now, I would put the fictional characters into this situation yesterday, and it says how it could have been prevented. So The Near Enemy.
The Near Enemy is the book. John Ligato, thanks so much. Appreciate it.
You're welcome. Thank you.
And he joined us on our turnkey.pro answer line.